Hey, how's it going? So this is going to be our first one in a while where we do a PC part picker build. I've been wanting to do one, just haven't had the free time. I've got about an hour of free time right now, so we're going to get this busted out real quick. I wanted to do a new budget-based build now that Ryzen has been introduced. So obviously go with Ryzen 3. In terms of which one, you're getting 4 extra gigahertz for about 20 bucks here. Now, 1200 can easily be overclocked to the same speed as the 1300X. So you won't gain anything there, but the 1300X can then be overclocked to right around 4 gigahertz. It's right underneath 4 gigahertz if I remember correctly. So that's most likely going to be our best bet. You're getting 20 bucks and essentially another gigahertz over what the 1200 will do stock. So we can go with the 1300X. It is not going to be the cheapest budget build because of that. We could easily drop $20 off of it if it's at like $500 or 530 and I want it to be an even 500. I can definitely do that. Now for cooler, since the better the cooler, the better these will overclock, and it makes a huge difference with Ryzen. I do want to see what's our cheapest 240 mil. I can dig that. About 80 bucks. I might go with the Cooler Master one though. Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Cooler Master. Just because I've never actually done much research on the Cooler Master, and this will force me to do research on it. In terms of motherboard, definitely want a B350 board, overclockability of course, and then I always want an ATX board just because it's so much easier to build in, and they generally have better power delivery. Of course, this has 0 pictures, so I can't see. Oh, never mind. Pretty beefy chokes on it. Yeah, this one will work. It's got a black and white themed, which I'm not a fan of, but it'll work. So we're gonna go with the ASRock B350 Pro 4 memory. Remembering that Ryzen does perform much better with higher memory clocks. So some 3200 megahertz DDR4. We're gonna go with an 8 gig kit. And in terms of color, I just want to check it. Black, that's perfect. Okay, you. God, RAM is expensive right now. Alright, storage. Since it's a budget build, we're not going to worry too much about getting an SSD in there. I will, however, get a hybrid 1 terabyte drive. And I think that's a pretty good compromise. And you don't pay much more for hybrid versus purely mechanical. Video card. This is where it gets a little bit more difficult. Could go with Vega 56, but that's a $400 price tag. Not what I'm wanting to spend. Now if we're going budget, the 570 is probably going to be just about max. And even then, with all the mining fiascos going on right now, graphics cards are getting really expensive. So what's the 560 sitting at currently? That I can roll with. Makes no sense that the 560 is literally half the price of the 570 without having half of the performance. Idiotic. Gonna get 4 gig version obviously. Black. Black. Alright, well, we'll run with you. Got a decent black componentry with a black and white board. I think getting a black and white case would look sweet. Where is color? There's color. Black and white. So mostly black or mostly white. That would actually look kind of nice. I think we're probably going to roll with that. What's the... that looks cool though. That looks much too plain for me, so I think we're going to go with the Phantom 410. I've never heard of this company, Anides. Oh, that looks kind of sweet. Got a lot of tempered glass on there. Price jumps a fair bit, so now we're going to go with the NZXT Phantom 410. Yeah, we're going to go with the Phantom 410. Power supply, what are we sitting at? We're going to get 500 watt power supply. That should be plenty. So I want semi-modular, 80 plus bronze, 500. $5 to get to an EVGA card. We'll go with an EVGA card just because of their very good warranty process, and they tend to stand by their parts better. So I think that's going to be it. Let's check the price. That's more than I wanted to be at. Let's see where I can drop things down. I can go to a 120 mil liquid cooler. That'll drop things. I do want liquid because of Ryzen. It works way better with liquid. Yeah. Yeah. That's a huge drop. That's like $100. So we'll run with the Cooler Master Lite. And that drops us... kind of makes me want to keep it right there. Just 'cause. That's... yeah. Pretty good price for the video card. RAM, I could drop to 3000 megahertz. Let's see where that puts me if I drop to 3000 megahertz instead of 3200. That's $10. That's not worth it. Yeah, it was $10. I'll pay $10 to get that little bit extra. B350 board, I think it was a $10 difference. Not much else I can cut out of it, unless I went with a cheaper case. Which I could do, but no, we're going to keep it right there. So this is your 600 or so budget build. I can easily drop this down a whole bunch. To recap over the build, we're looking at the estimated 247 watt power draw, overclocking the CPU, RAM, and the RX 560. That's going to raise up a whole bunch. So 500 watt probably be fine. I don't think I'd run into any sort of issue with in terms of power draw with what I've got. So overclocking the RAM doesn't increase the power draw by much. Ryzen, this is already a 65 watt TEP, so it's not going to draw too much. You generally don't get much of an overclock out of graphics cards, like 15% at the most, so you don't draw that much more power. So 500 watt power supply is probably golden. We're running with the Ryzen 3 1300X. Chose that over the 1200 just because it was $20 for a whole lot more performance. Cooler, went with the Cooler Master Liquid Light 120. Only because there was about $100 difference between the equivalent and the 240 mil, and that really drops the price down a whole bunch. Yes, you're going to get a way more better performance out of your cooler with the 240 mil, but for a budget-oriented build, you're probably not looking at getting the maximum overclock out of it, so this is going to be just fine. Motherboard, the ASRock AB350 Pro 4 ATX board. I always prefer ATX over a micro ATX. Just having built both, ATX gives you a whole lot more room, and they generally have better power delivery, so you can get a better overclock without raising the VRM temperature, or not VRM temperature, the power delivery, chokes, the capacitors, all that. And I like having a bigger motherboard. I'm not a fan of things being super teeny, as small as possible. I like them to be able to be worked on. Being a mechanic working on modern cars, everything's compact and small and you can't do anything. When they're older cars, they were much bigger, more open, easier to work on. Memory went with just the cheapest to 8 gig 3200 megahertz DDR4 kit, which was the G-Skill Ripjaws 5 series. It's black, which matches with our black and white motherboard and the black cooler perfectly. With Ryzen's Infinity Fabric having the faster the RAM, essentially the faster that Infinity Fabric can communicate between cores. So Ryzen benefits a lot from having fast RAM. You do get diminishing returns beyond a point. I think around the 3000 to 3200 megahertz is kind of the sweet spot. You can get a little more performance if you push higher, but again, diminishing returns is just not worth the extra money. Storage, we would benefit greatly from an SSD here, but since we're trying to keep it a budget build, for 60 bucks I can get a terabyte of hard drive or hybrid hard drive space. Yes, it's 5400 RPM. Actually, I didn't even realize it was 5400 RPM. Let's check that. Because if I can get it 7200 RPM for roughly the same price, definitely going to go with that. Oh, whoops, terabyte. Yes. And make you 7200 RPM. Back. 3.5-inch drive, most likely. Yeah, okay. I picked the 2.5 inch instead of 3.5. $10 more. You'll get way more performance out of the 3.5-inch drive. So we're gonna run with that. It does drive our power drop a tiny bit. It's negligible basically, and it ruins our sweet price point we had. That's kind of upsetting. But I think the performance benefits will be well worth the $10 increase. So, like I was saying, you have the Seagate FireCuda 1 terabyte. It's 3.5-inch drive, 7200 RPM versus the 5400 RPM I had just 30 seconds ago. Huge boost in performance, jumping up that speed. This is also a hybrid drive, so you get, I think it's like 32 gigs of SSD storage on board. That's usually used for the operating system, things like that. You don't get to control what's used by the hybrid storage. It's got smart AI software. It learns by what you use the computer for and stores things in the SSD. So it makes a difference in terms of boot times. You're probably not going to get a game stored on there. There'd be no real way to tell, I guess, except for having a system with and without hybrid. Exact same componentry, everything else, and testing load times on games, but there's no point in that. Video card running the MSI RX 560, the 4 gig option over the 2 gig, just because you really need about 6 gigs of video RAM to really play some of these newer titles at higher settings. But because of the mining right now, the 570, 580 cards are being used a lot, so their prices jump up a whole bunch. Like the 570 4 gig model was $300 compared to the 560 4 gig model, and there isn't that much difference in terms of price. So definitely went with the 560 here. Normally you could get a 570 for about, excuse me, $200. So that would be a definite better upgrade if when you go to make this build, the 560 is roughly the same price, if not a little cheaper, and then the 570 would be brought back down to its original price once the mining calms down a little bit. The case, we're running the NZXT Phantom 410. It's a black and white case. NZXT is kind of known for having a very simplistic, they call it a Nordic style. Everything's simple, there isn't too much flashiness. This is I'm blanking out on the word. This is not that. Let's go with that. This is got the aggressive edges, things aren't uniform, boxy. This is an exception to that rule. There we go. And it kind of catches my appeal. The only thing I don't like is this little bulge on the bottom. I'm assuming that's for a fan, but I'm not a fan. Pun. I do like cases to be somewhat rectangular, and having this random little bulge when the rest of the case is rectangular, not a fan. But it does seem that the top of the case has a bit of a crown to it. I'd be interested to see what the reasoning for that is, or if it was purely for aesthetics. Anyway, it's a mid-tower case, so plenty of room to build in. Matches the theme we have going on here, black and white. Perfect. Power supply, running the EVGA BQ 500 watt. It's an 80 plus bronze semi-modular ATX power supply. Went with the EVGA even though it was a little bit more expensive than the Rosewell option, just because EVGA, it's really apparent with the 1080 fiasco they had going on recently that EVGA stands behind their products. They offer great quality, great warranty service, so there's a lot of peace of mind involved when buying an EVGA product. That being said, I have a Rosewell and an EVGA power supply. EVGA one's like a 530 watt or something like that. The Rosewell's a 750. When I upgraded componentry in the computer, needed to upgrade power supply. And I haven't had an issue with the Rosewell one, so there probably isn't anything wrong with it. It just ends up being a lot cheaper across the board than all the other manufacturers, so that kind of makes me a little wary, although I haven't heard anything bad about Rosewell, and I constantly see good things about them actually, so maybe it's just me. That's it. I didn't toss in any network adapters, anything like that. Just went with pure componentry, and right now you're looking about 674, 68. Again, once the mining calms down a bit, I would expect to see graphics card prices drop. Right now, RAM is really high because of the shortages with manufacturing, so that would also drop. You could easily wait a month or two maybe and get this down to $600. As you can see, a lot of things jumped up recently, especially in this area. What's that? I don't know what that is. I'm trying to find. Oh well, the 560 jumped up a bit. Everything's been jumping up. Nothing has been on the downwards trend here. RAM's jumped up. The Ryzen, obviously, since it's just released, huge jump right here. And the FireCuda storage, fairly steady. You don't see too much wavering with in terms of storage, but you'll probably get this down to about $600 if you were to wait on this build. Right now is a terrible time to buy a lot of different PC components because of what's going on in the market right now. But that'll do it for now. I'll always leave the link to this build in the description of the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.